Call this meeting to order. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Item C, adjustments to the agenda.
No recommended adjustments for the agenda this evening.
Okay. Item D, public participation.
I'm Kelly Casey. I am here to respectfully request that public comment be moved until the board's discussion with regards to winter sports has been completed. That way reflection from the fellow community members can maybe reflect your dialogue. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Higgins?
That's up to the board. Typically, you have public comment, and then you do your business. Amending the agenda would require a board motion.
So, just so I understand, is the request to have public comment after the board has discussed things, or after we've taken action?
Just after your discussion, that way maybe our comments with regards to winter sports can reflect your dialogue.
Uh-huh.
Thank you.
So we did have discussion last week on this topic.
I do think part of that, though, does go to speak to the fact that we have some general recommendations now from, and we have the MPA chalk talk, so I can see where Ms. Casey is coming from. That being said, I don't have an opinion one way or the other.
I feel that we had this discussion last week, and now is the time for public discussion. But I welcome other comments.
I don't feel strongly one way or another. I don't feel strongly one way or another either.
I think our discussion can be better informed after hearing from members of the public. We've already heard from a number of people through emails. We heard from people last week. I'm happy to see more people here this evening. So I'd be comfortable having our discussion following public comment. I understand your point, but I think it can work out well either way. So I think.
I'm just wondering, will it save time? If we discuss it, there might not be comment, is what I'm wondering. There might not even, that's my,
If you're going to go on that
That's
approach, you want
true.
to hear what the members of the public have to say.
yeah, no, I'm just wondering if,
And I don't see a really big crowd here tonight, so.
Is there anyone else who would like to comment before we move on? Yeah.
So, I was at the last meeting, and I actually had commentary after your discussion.
May I ask you to please state your name?
Oh, sorry.
Thank you.
My name is Charlotte Jordan. I'm Jocelyn Jordan's mom. And I was at the last meeting and actually had some comments after the discussion that was taking place amongst the board members. I wasn't called upon because that's not how you run your meetings. But your discussion prompted some thoughts of my own that I wasn't able to share because it wasn't the time. So I would agree with Kelly Casey, that allowing us to hear your discussion and then give you our feedback or thoughts would be more effective in helping you come to a decision.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Wood. You read my mind.
Anyone else? So I think we need a motion if we're going to move public comment to after our discussion. If there isn't a motion,
How do you feel about this?
I will make a motion to move item D, public participation, to follow discussion and consideration of winter sports and co-curricular activities number 1.
I'll second it.
okay. Any discussion? All those in favor? Okay, we are moving to item E, new business, discussion and consideration of winter sports and co-curricular activities.
So in your packets, and just so you know, in your packets, the information that was provided to you has also been prepared in handouts that are in the front chairs here. I believe some of the members of the audience have picked some of those up. Just to give you an overview of that information and kind of set the tone for your conversation. Obviously, you had a meeting last week where you heard a lot of great information from members of the public. There's been a lot of information flowing. I'm sure you've all done your own research. And thinking back towards the goals that you're talking about, first and foremost, one of your goals as a board is to make sure that schools stay open to in-person instruction and maximizing in-person instruction. Along with that is trying to continue to move back towards as close to a sense of normalcy, and again, whatever that definition of normalcy is, in all the things that we provide for the students and staff in our schools. Obviously, winter co- and extracurricular activities are an important and inherent part of that. And I think a close second to the goal of keeping your schools open is trying to find a way to safely have as normal as possible a season for co- and extracurricular activities. So to that end, the information that's been provided to you is to provide you with as much information as possible to help you take any recommendations to move forward with a series of winter activities that do provide a safe atmosphere and environment for all participants, and all participants means student participants, spectators, game officials, judges, et cetera. So with that being said, let me just run through a couple of pieces of information that was provided to you. One of them is a document I'll refer to that is General Recommendations for Winter Activities. This is a document that was distributed late this afternoon by the Maine Principals Association. And just, if I could, I just want to read the first paragraph, because I think it's important to know that there was a lot of discussion across a lot of different groups that are education related that ended up in the creation and dissemination of this document. And I'll quote, "As we head into the 2021-22 winter sports season, the Maine Principals Association, the Maine School Superintendents Association, the Maine Athletic Administrators Association, the Maine Music Educators Association, the Maine School Boards Association, and the Maine Athletic Trainers Association offer the following recommendations for school-based extracurricular activities. All agencies agree that education-based activities, including music and performing arts programs, support students with their social, emotional, physical, and mental health, and they play a key role in the community. We will continue to seek the safest ways to make activities available for young people across the state." Then it goes on to say, and this is an MPA piece, "The mission of the MPA Sports Medicine Advisory Committee is to provide guidance to the MPA member schools concerning the health and safety of students participating in interscholastic sports and activities. Team sports and other group extracurricular activities can increase the risk of SARS-CoV-2 transmission for students, coaches, referees, and staff, especially during the indoor and close contact team sports. We strongly recommend that all schools follow this unified guidance for extracurricular activities." The last piece that I'm going to read, because everyone else can read this, is, "Please note this information is frequently changing given the nature of COVID-19. For the most up-to-date information, please refer to the Maine CDC COVID website." And I'd also reiterate that that's also an indication that as conditions change moving forward, what you decide upon tonight can be revisited, as these guidelines may be revisited by those organizations. In essence, the document that you have here covers a lot of information that's covered in the standard operating procedure for investigating COVID cases in our pre-K through 12 schools. It's very detailed, it's very well done, and it recognizes and reflects things that the Maine Principals Association, who we've been following since this whole thing started, are supporting. I'll direct you to the last page, and this will lead us into the conversation that you're going to have. And on the last page at the bottom, it says, local districts, leagues may consider developing guidelines to be followed in these areas. Spectators and capacity limits, concessions, cheerleaders during a contest, and I want to emphasize, when you say cheerleaders during a contest, that means the sideline cheering at games. Competition cheering is included in all of the other activities. Weight rooms, locker rooms, participation against schools with different policies, which is a topic that will come up a little bit later this evening. Masking during competition, and when we say competition, let's remember we're talking about not just interscholastic athletics, but we're talking about our co-curriculars. So the example might be in basketball. If an athlete comes onto the floor, they do not need to wear their mask. They go to the bench to come out, or for a timeout, they put it on. Or in a dramatic performance, students who are on stage performing could take them off. When they're off stage, they put it back on. That's what that is referring to. Mandatory pooled testing, out-of-state competition, middle-level athletics, and factors that would allow athletes and officials to remove masks while competing. And I'm glad they mentioned middle-level athletics, because since we've been doing this, the pieces that have been put in place for our high school athletes have been mirrored at the middle school. So that's one document. Again, I know you've seen a preview of it earlier than today. The final one didn't come out until just this afternoon.
That's what they like to do.
Well, I think you also got to remember that there've been a lot of people at the table, and I think dissimilar to what's happened in previous seasons, there was a lot of collaboration amongst those groups to have conversations at the same table rather than working at odds, and I think that's a positive piece. The other piece that I think is very important, and this comes from the Maine Principals Association, this was distributed yesterday afternoon in their Chalk Talk. And I think I would like to go through and read this, because there are some important pieces here that their Sports Medicine Advisory Committee is recommending. So first and foremost, winter sports activities and guidelines have been developed and are being reviewed and approved by the various state health and education agencies. This is a statement from Dr. William Hines, who is the chair of the MPA Sports Medicine Committee, regarding the upcoming season. And I will read, quote, part of the mission of the MPA Sports Medicine Advisory Committee is to provide guidance to the MPA concerning the health and safety of students participating in interscholastic sports and activities. Team sports and other group activities can increase the risk of COVID-19 transmission for students, coaches, referees, and staff, especially during indoor and close contact team sports. Considering this, the MPA Sports Medicine Committee continues to support the following recommendations for winter indoor sports and activities. Vaccination of all eligible students and adults who are involved in these activities. Pooled screening testing of all indoor sport and activity participants, including students, coaches, administrators, and volunteers. Proper wearing of masks during all sports activities, including during practice, competition, team group meetings, and in the locker room. And when possible, physical distancing of 1 meter, 3.28 feet. And I've got to be right up front with you, that's the first time I've heard the 1 meter, 3.28 feet. You know, we've been hearing 3 and 6 feet.
Right.
Your return to school piece talks about spacing 3 feet to the extent possible. But these recommendations, and I want to reiterate this, are consistent with the current Maine CDC guidelines and are subject to change as more knowledge is obtained. They also specified in that document some information about wrestling. For specifically wrestling, after hearing from a number of schools, the MPA Sports Medicine Committee and the Interscholastic Management Committee, which is like the executive committee of the Maine Principals Association, have revised recommendations to require vaccination for all wrestlers. So they've taken that away, and what they're saying now is wrestlers will follow the same guidance as other winter sports in recommending that all wrestlers, officials, and coaches wear a mask. And I'm pleased that they included this, music and performing arts. As we head inside for winter activities, we continue to hear about music and performing arts programs that are being suspended. These programs should be following the same guidelines that are in place for athletic programs, and the same effort should be made to ensure these crucial programs are available for those students. And I think that's, no pun intended, music to your ears, because we all feel the same way. Maybe it was a pun. If it's a bad one, I apologize.
It's appreciated.
So, those are documents that form the basis of what's in front of you for some guidelines for discussion. Now, had a meeting with our administrative group, and most of them are here tonight, and we went through all of these. What you have in front of you represents fairly unanimous and fairly much of a consensus, but not complete, and I'll identify the items of which you don't have complete consensus from the administrators. But I would just like to run down through them and then turn it over to you folks for conversations. And I would encourage you, if you have specific questions of our administrators, they're here tonight. I had a conversation with Mr. Frost earlier. I know some conversations and questions may come up with regard to how we can accommodate home and away spectators in a safe way. And I see Mr. Frost nodding. I think he's ready for question. Yeah, he is. Okay. What we've got, and we'll just run through these general recommendations for winter activities adopted by multiple education-related associations and groups, as I just read, and supported by the MPA Chalk Talk. These documents are consistent with recommendations from the Maine CDC and the Standard Operating Procedure for investigating COVID-19. So, first and foremost, generally, vaccination. What our administrative group is recommending is that the school department make a statement that either recommends or encourages students and staff participating and who are eligible for COVID-19 vaccine be vaccinated as a precautionary measure. Also recommending or encouraging participation in the school's pool testing program by all students and staff participating in co- and extracurricular activities, also as a proactive measure. One question that will come up is if a student or a staff member who is participating in pool testing is exposed either during the school day or during a school-sponsored activity, do the exceptions to quarantining apply to them? The answer is yes, as long as they are asymptomatic. Okay, that's a question that came up. So those are two recommendations that are a unanimous consensus of the administrative group here. Now, I'm putting in here for part of your discussion as you move forward later, an option that's being discussed in several school systems, and some of them have adopted it as a means of reducing the number of required quarantines and preserving your activities. Is pool testing either being used as a mandated activity for all participants, or in some cases as an incentive for people? And that may come into discussion when you're talking about the masks, and I'll talk about that in just a minute. But again, I would reiterate, participants in pool testing who are identified as close contacts by exposure at a school or school-sponsored activity. Again, that's not community activity. That's not something over at the YMCA. That's only a school or school-sponsored activity. And remain asymptomatic can continue to participate in school-sponsored activities. So those two are pretty unanimous. That's one option that you may want to discuss. As far as face coverings and masking, this is not universal amongst the administrators, but the language reads, universal masking of all team and group members, student participants, coaches, advisors, and ancillary personnel will be required for all indoor and co- and extracurricular activities in the Ellsworth School Department. With the sport of swimming, participants may remove their mask only while in the pool during practice and competition. Failure to comply with universal masking may result in an individual's removal from the contest or venue. This also applies to student and staff participants of visiting teams and groups. It's written that way because that is part of the recommendation that came from the other organizations. I can tell you there is some feeling amongst our administrative team that they would like to see an exception made for student participants only, while they're actively participating. But that was certainly not universal. But there is a sentiment of that amongst our administrative staff. And I'll reiterate it again, an option for student participants who are actively and regularly participating in the school pool testing program to remove masks while actively participating is something other districts have talked about. And another one that other districts have talked about is the use of vaccination status as a metric for consideration of removing masks while actively participating. One piece, and I had this conversation with Mr. Frost, and I think it's important that you know this going into your conversation on masking. And this applies at the high school level. The athletic league to which Ellsworth High School belongs, Penobscot Valley Conference, has adopted a rule. Is it a rule or a policy, Josh?
It was a motion, so.
So it was a vote. It was a vote of that organization. Okay, thank you. So they've adopted a rule or a bylaw whereby member schools are obligated to wear face masks against any opponent whose school system has adopted a universal face masking policy, even if one of the school systems has adopted a policy that permits removal of masks by active participants. So the example that I would give you, and I'll use Bucksport as an example because I know they've passed their policy and they are requiring universal masking. If you as a board were to vote tonight to have a policy that permitted face masks to be removed while students are actively participating, and we had a contest against Bucksport, based upon what the Penobscot Valley Conference has adopted, even our students would be required to mask up when playing Bucksport, whether that's in Ellsworth or in Bucksport. Is that how that was interpreted, Josh? Okay. The other question that may come up, and I think it's important to put this out there, is does a league vote supersede what a school board says? Okay. And you could have that discussion. The one conversation I had with one of my colleagues was, if that does happen, would there be a position where one of the schools is put in a position of saying, well, if that other school is not requiring their students to wear masks while they're participating, do we want to go to that school? Now, no one has said that that's going to happen, but I know that has been a conversation out there, and I think you need to have it on the table. Other thing on the universal masking is universal masking of all game and contest officials, judges, athletic trainers, required for all indoor co- and extracurricular activities in the school department. This was something that was consensus across the administrators in our department. Another one that was a consensus was Pep Band. Pep Band will be permitted to attend home events and be seated in a separate area of the gymnasium. Universal masking will be required at all times, with the exception of when playing a brass or a woodwind instrument. And again, I think you should be consistent with your policy of masking for your Pep Band as you are with the athletic teams. With the Pep Band there, bell covers for instruments will be required, and that's not a problem. Okay. Sideline cheerleaders, and again, the only reason this is specified differently from competition cheering is competition cheering is included in every other aspect of this. But the feeling is consensus that sideline cheerleaders be permitted to attend home events. Universal masking required of all team personnel. Again, the exception would be actively participating. Locker rooms, changing rooms. Locker rooms, changing rooms be accessible to both home and away teams and groups. Transportation, this is one that you're really not going to have much conversation on because this is above and beyond us. Masking and spacing guidelines are in effect for all ESD student and staff participants on school-provided or rented transportation. That comes from the federal level. We can't change that. Spectators. We all felt very strongly of recommending that spectators were required to wear masks during all indoor activities in the school department, and that eligibility would be spectators from the Ellsworth School Department and the visiting team or group. And again, I'm saying group because I want to make sure we're including co-curricular activities. Will be permitted to attend ESD activities based upon a limited capacity. So that's one of the challenges that at the building level, I know Josh and Matt Downs, and I'm sure Dan and Travis are part of those conversations, is addressing the appropriate level of capacity. And some things that are considerations. If you look at your return to school plan based upon the CDC guidelines, it was spacing 3 feet to the extent possible. That's one litmus test that can be used. I know in the theater for the performance that's coming up next week, tickets have been sold based on a spacing of every other seat in the theater. So you don't have a full 3 feet there, but you've got 20 to 24 inches. I know in a conversation with Mr. Frost earlier today, one option he was considering, and I don't want to steal your thunder, Josh, is it okay if I say this? Was basing your capacity on every other seat, which is about 20 to 24 inches, so you'd have some commonality there. But that's one thing that you're looking at. The other thing that goes along with that is, once you determine your capacity, let's say at Ellsworth High School, the capacity of that gym, as issued by the fire marshal, is 950. So if you take a look at having your Pep Band in there in a separate area, you've got to cordon off a section of bleachers for those student participants. If you've been at a basketball game, you know that the scorer's table is set at a certain spot on the floor and the bleachers are pushed in 2 or 3 levels, Josh? 4. Okay, 4 levels. So that takes your capacity down a little bit. So you're looking at developing a capacity. Okay. The numerical piece is relatively easy. The spacing thing is a relatively easy piece. But then it comes in, how do you allocate? How many seats do you allocate to home fans, away fans, students? And another question that came up, and I'm going to call it, and I don't think he would mind because he's gone to basketball games every year for 78 years, Josh? Longer than you've been around, right? Yeah, you do. The Buzzy AWOL rule. You've got community members that love to come to basketball games. How do you allocate and make sure that there's access to games for a representative group of people? But again, the strongest consensus was we all want to see spectators from home and away. There are some details that would need to be worked out. The other piece, and I know Josh and Matt will be working on this, and I don't see Mrs. Wright here, but home events, because if you have a limited capacity, you're not going to have a full gym necessarily, will still be live streamed through various sources. And one of the challenges, I think we can cover it, but is staffing to make sure we can do that. But the intent would be to have that. Concessions, this is another place where it's not universal. I'll be right up front, I'm an advocate of having concessions in the gym. One thing that we were universal on is specifically while masking is in place for indoor participation, food and beverage may not be permitted in the same area where the event or activity is taking place, plain and simple. I was an advocate at the beginning of our meeting for having concessions available, in great part because, number one, it does serve as a fundraiser for some groups. We have boosters clubs, we have other groups that would sell food and drink at games. It does serve as a fundraiser. And the language that was in here would be, depending upon the facility and availability, a separate space would be set up for eating and drinking, and those in that area would be encouraged to maintain as close to a 6-foot distance as possible between individuals not from the same family. So you could envision that Ellsworth High School, you know where the concession stand is, you've got a cafe area, you've got a cafeteria, there would be space to do that. Some of the questions and concerns that came up in the conversation with the administrators was monitoring that area, cleaning that area. So that was one conversation we had, and I think that's something we would need to work out. The other thing that was brought up was on, and I'm going to use basketball as an example, on the typical night when you've got a JV and a varsity game. I'm going to quote one of our administrators, but I'm not going to identify them, who said, hey, it's only 2 games, people can go 2 games without eating or drinking. So there was a sense that maybe you don't have concessions on events like that, but if you happen to have a day-long event for wrestling, or a day-long event where you've got the same school coming and you've got fans coming back and forth, that maybe you make the concessions available for that day. Still separated from where the activity's taking place. And the final piece on this was postseason tournaments, festivals, and competitions. Certainly we want to support any of our students or teams who qualify for postseason events. So ESD students and staff who participate in postseason events, festivals, and competitions are required to follow the health and safety guidelines of the hosting venue for both in and approved out-of-state activities. And I just gave the example. University of Maine currently has a requirement for proof of vaccination or of a negative COVID test 72 hours prior to the competition. So if our student athletes or student performers wanted to attend and participate on that campus, that's something that would have to be in place. Now, different universities and colleges across the state have different levels, and I gave you that information last week. That's something that we would have to be aware of. The other piece that I'm going to put out there, that with regard to those types of things, let's just say that you were to vote and maintain the universal masking piece, and it conditions warranted that it stayed that way throughout the entire season. If the venue where a postseason event took place didn't require masking, would the board's decision to have universal masking hold for that? Or would student athletes or student participants be allowed to unmask for that? A similar example to that was in volleyball season. We had a masking requirement here. One of our neighboring schools didn't. When our students went and participated over there, they were allowed to take their masks off when they were playing. So what that is that is a list of recommendations that we have for your consideration, along with some variables. I'm sorry to give you so many variables, but I really think it represents a lot of thoughtfulness that our administrators put in, looking at guidelines that we expected to come down, and really looking at trying to find a way to have seasons and activities for our students and our staff and our community that try to meet all of the goals of having as normal a season as possible, keep the seasons going for the entire season, and keep our schools open. So, happily for me and for you.
That's the end.
So, we turn it over to you folks, and again, we've got our administrators, most of our administrators who were here in the meeting earlier this week. So,
Well, thank you, Mr. Higgins.
Can I ask a question?
me?
Yeah.
Sure.
And this, you or Josh may be able to answer this. So for wrestling, the NBA Sports Medicine Committee and the Interscholastic Management Committee have revised the recommendations to require vaccinations for all wrestlers. How does that, do they have to be fully vaccinated?
I don't
Or-
think they wrote that very well, Paul.
Yeah.
I think what they intended to say was,
They're not
they
going to
revised it to say that they're not requiring vaccinations.
Okay.
When
Oh,
I
okay.
first read that, I thought the same thing, but no, that.
Oh, okay,
Everything we've heard is that the vaccination piece they put in place,
gotcha. No, that makes sense now, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, they didn't write it very well, but now that I'm rereading it, I see that,
To treat it like every other sport.
yes, exactly.
Yes,
Okay.
thank you. Appreciate it.
So I can jump in and start the conversation if everyone is good with that. So, there are lots of details that need to be ironed out, and I don't know that we can do that all here tonight. But I think that we can come up with the bigger picture. And so my thought for the big picture is, for winter sports, we either make it an option of you are vaccinated, you're participating in pool testing, or you're wearing a mask. So if you opt to
Do one of the above.
one of the three for the bigger picture. But also all spectators would have to be masked. And for all sports, regardless, so when I talk about either being vaccinated or participating in pool testing, I'm talking about just when you are on the floor and being active. When you're on the sidelines, you're in a mask. When you are not participating in any way, you're in a mask. But, so that's just a start off jumping point.
just so I reflect the conversation, so is.
Yeah.
What you're saying is, so universal masking with the exception of students who are actively participating in their activity,
Yes,
and in order to not wear a mask while they're actively participating, either participate in the pool testing, have proof of vaccination?
yes.
Okay, I heard you correctly. All right,
Yes,
good.
you did. Good.
Kelly, what would that mean for visiting teams? Would we require that from the visiting teams, or?
Well, I think what Mr. Higgins had said earlier about visiting teams, it's,
Well, yeah, and I think this comes to the piece I read with the Penobscot Valley Conference and how you would apply that. I don't think that you as a board could have any way that you could require another, give another school department an opportunity. Like, say, for example, Bucksport, they've already voted to require masking for their students, period. If they came here to participate, if you pass what Kelly was just talking about, based upon the Penobscot Valley Conference,
We would still-
for
we
that
would
game, we would have to have our students wear masks regardless of that piece. And I think that brings up the other question, which we're not going to resolve tonight, is if you don't recognize what the Penobscot Valley Conference is, that would be a case where Bucksport would be making a decision. We're either going to come and play or we're not.
So,
Debbie?
it is my understanding that because the town elected us, when it comes to this town, our vote supersedes the Penobscot Valley Association, because those people are not elected officials, and our constituents did not have a say in that. So, I like your idea, however, the part that is very sticky for me is the whole who checks a vaccine card. Because that vaccine card has personal information that is, it's subject to identity theft. So,
And maybe this will help. And Addie, first, I concur with you that I'm of the position that what the local school board decides would supersede what a league or a conference decides. Now, again, that may result in other teams not playing, or that remains to be seen. But as far as the vaccination piece, and we've dealt with this when we're doing contact tracing, okay? Even though we're required to submit to the Department of Health and Human Services the number of staff who are vaccinated, we do a survey and we take the information from them. We don't ask for proof of a card. We're not asking for that proof. The only time that we ask for proof of a card from a staff member is if they are an identified close contact, and by being vaccinated, they don't have to quarantine. The person that asks for that is our school nurse, period.
So would our school nurse be asking,
Well,
Our
we would have to, we would have to
families-
work that up, but we do that because we want to protect that
right,
confidentiality.
Right.
When it comes to students,
Right.
that's another place where our school nurses have access to a database, and only they have it, of students that are vaccinated or not, because we have to make that same determination. You know, if the student is vaccinated and asymptomatic and they're a close contact, they don't have to quarantine. So we would have to run a cross-check of those pieces and make sure it's on a need-to-know basis, but we're pretty well-versed in protecting confidentiality of students and staff.
but what about the visiting team then? Do you see what I'm saying?
If-
Like that
if-
gets,
Well, but number one, I don't think that we can mandate Bucksport coming here to do it, but
no, but hypothetically, if MDI had the same rules we did,
it would be up to them.
to then,
So
and we
it's
would
up to
be,
their athletic director to say, these students who are here are
Yep.
okay to take their masks off.
So
So
there's a
that's-
trust
that's-
factor
That's how I would
there.
take it. You know, if that was the case with MDI, and I think it would be up to MDI's board and administration to have a mechanism in place whereby they could, you know, their athletic director could call our athletic director and say, we're all set, all of our participants coming tonight.
Or this or that.
Mhm.
Now, is there any, I can't think of this off the top of my head, but aren't participants in sports required to present their insurance card so wouldn't that be the same information potentially that would be on the vaccine
Well,
card?
we do have
on
proof of
their
information, but we've really taken you know, that's an easy one. You gotta provide proof of insurance to participate, and it's a voluntary activity. And we've always maintained that confidentially for years. Josh is well-versed at that now, too. But as far as the vaccination piece, I think the places that you would go, if this is a direction you want to go, is we provide a list to the school nurse, and the school nurse lets us know these people would be eligible. And we would have to trust that our administration, probably the guy standing up at the podium, would be the one that we would trust with it.
So correct me if I'm wrong, Dan, but I believe our school nurses have access to
To
the
all of
state database.
They do.
Yes.
Perfect.
for
Yeah, so
vaccine-
coaches and athletic directors would just have a
They do
yes
for
or no.
they do for students.
Yeah.
Not for staff, though.
Right.
but staff wouldn't have their mask off.
Correct.
And I do have one more question before Josh. What I'm thinking of is if we have, say we have a school, so we've talked about if we have a school that has a universal masking, we've talked about if a school has the same policy as we do, what if we have a school that has a no masking? They aren't requiring their students to wear masks at all. How would we handle that
Well,
situation?
one of the pieces, and Josh is probably going to say this too, is the conversations amongst and between schools is that you would honor what is taking place in another school. So if we were to adopt the, while active, non-masking, if we went to play at Bucksport, they have a full masking.
We would fully
Our
mask.
students wear masks.
Right.
Right, and then, so then if we were playing against someone who has universal no masking, like masks optional, then in order to play against us, they would have to follow the same rules that we do in that their student would have to be participating in pool testing or
if-
vaccinated in order to take their mask off.
If they were coming here, they would either have to universally mask or, that would, I can see a management thing for you on this one.
I'm just trying to follow what you're saying, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think what she's saying is if we adopt the no mask while actually participating, and the other school has a
No
policy
mask
that
at all.
would allow that, no mask at all, they would at the very least have to follow what's in place here.
Yes.
But if we go there, would our students still?
If we go there, yes.
Your action would be the thing that would determine that. And I would recommend that whatever action you take, you specify that.
So, Mr. Frost, so each school district, has to adhere to the highest
Yes.
level? Okay.
Yeah, at our AD meeting last week, there was a motion that all PVC-sponsored schedules, that universal masking would take place. And that vote actually was 17 to 17, so the motion did not pass. Because there's a lot of schools that currently aren't even wearing masks while they're in school. So they said, so you're gonna make us now wear a mask after school when we haven't been wearing one all day during the school day. And then the next motion that came up was just what you just said, kind of the stronger requirement that you would follow. So the examples that we've already heard tonight, and that passed overwhelmingly.
Okay.
So, and just, can I go back to what Abby said just about vaccination cards and whatnot? When we go to UMaine for track, for indoor track, we will have to do that. We'll have to show UMaine, but the way that we show UMaine is by every week, I'm gonna send the track team with a list. Here's who's showing up today. Vaccinated, yes. Proof of negative COVID tests in the last 3 days, yes. I don't need to send a stack of photocopies. I just have one sheet. I sign off. The nurse agrees that we've done the homework, and they take it, and they basically, here's your ticket to everybody into the field house.
So if they were gonna have to have a negative COVID test in the last 72 hours, is that something that the school, we can do at the school with the?
That's,
That's,
Is that
that's,
what we're
that's
talking
your,
about
that's your
next?
next item,
Okay.
but it's a good question, because I think people need to know that. Right now, the use of the Binax AG test cards, Binax now,
Yeah.
is limited to the pool testing program. What we're asking for, and this is after a good conversation with our nurses, is to expand the use of that. One would be to symptomatic students and staff members. And the other piece would be to support University of Maine piece. Now, the one thing that we have to put into that is, even though that's a permitted use, we're required to prioritize
Yes.
the pool testing, symptomatic student staff piece before athletics. So if you have enough supplies, the school could provide that.
Okay. I was just
If the
curious,
supplies,
because I know,
if the
I know
supplies
that
didn't
can be-
exist, that would be a tougher piece, and that's a bigger challenge.
I know that can be really costly if you're
Well-
going somewhere and saying, I'm getting a test to make sure I can play
But there's
sport."
one other piece that goes along with that we don't know yet. University of Maine, to my understanding, in Orono, is considering whether or not participation in pool testing would suffice as that negative test. We haven't gotten, well,
As of-
superintendent's level hasn't got word of the decision on that yet. Have you guys, Brad?
as of the last 2 days ago, the answer was no.
Don't-
Pool testing does not count for that.
So pool testing does not count, but if they had a specific individual to them Binax test, then it would.
Correct.
It just wouldn't be able to be, they were in that classroom pool on Monday and they were fine, and today is Tuesday, so,
Right, and most of our track meets are Friday nights or Saturdays.
right, so it would be the end of the
So
weekend.
even then, you're talking, it's too far.
Yeah, beyond the 72 hours, okay. And I do have a question in regards to the cheerleaders. When they're cheering on the sidelines, I'm assuming they're socially distanced on the sidelines. Will there be some provision in place so that if they're unmasked while they're participating, that the seat, the row right behind them won't be occupied so that there's space around
They
them?
typically cheer along the end line anyways,
Okay,
so the
perfect.
wall's there, so it's.
Yeah, so it's fine.
And we're pretty excited about that, because this year we have a lot of students interested in just sideline cheering. We're calling it game day cheering, and, because they don't want to do the competition piece, which is a lot more.
Intense.
Intense, yeah. So we do have, signed up, we have about 11 students interested in just game day, and another 9 or 10 that are just competition, or a combination of competition and game day, so.
I think I'm very curious to hear what some of the parents think about the three-piece option. You know, how comfortable are they with some of this? I think that's a really.
To make a
important
recommendation, you voted to allow public comment after. I would
Right.
suggest that you work through the entire
Go through the
piece,
entire
and then members
yeah.
of the public, should they wish to offer their perspective at that time, do it.
Well, keep note, late people, in case I forget.
So-
I want to know this.
So in the concessions portion, is it possible to have the cleaning done by a member of the sports booster or the PTF, or because of insurance purposes, does that have to be someone employed by the school?
Well, they do some of that cleaning anyway. I think some of the bigger concern is, you've got a group of people that would go in and potentially eat and drink during one part of the game or halftime, and then another group would come up later. The ability to have somebody go out and do that on a regular basis, that may present challenges. Now, I do know that there are a number of schools who are looking at doing this. There are a number of schools that are just saying no to concessions. But I'm just wondering if you want to focus on the masking piece and get through
Right,
that
sorry,
first.
I had
know.
written down questions and I just didn't want to forget.
They're all good
them.
questions, Beth.
They're all.
I just didn't want to forget them.
Mr. Higgins, when is our first game? Approximately.
First countable game at the high school level is December
10th.
10th now?
Yep.
Mr. Frost has one preseason game,
Right after Thanksgiving.
December 2nd.
Okay.
December 2nd. So there's time to work out the details of that.
That's what I'm
piece.
wondering.
Yeah, and isn't
Wrestling has a
Oh, yeah,
preseason
the-
thing on the
The
4th.
plays.
And theater.
Theater plays this weekend.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can't hear.
Woo! A week from
This
tomorrow's
weekend.
first performance.
Oh,
Yep.
wow.
But I really think, and again, I don't want to speak for everyone around the table, it seems to me that there is a leaning towards looking to find a mechanism that would permit students while participating to take their masks off, and when they're not actively participating, not, I may be reading it wrong. So if that's the direction you're leaning, it would be, what would be the mechanism to make that happen?
I
Do
do
you-
have- I
Do you
do.
just allow it, or do you put in what Kelly recommended as a starting point for the conversation?
I do have a question that would kind of go towards if we went in that direction where people who are either vaccinated or part of pool testing can remove their mask during participation, would that be just game participation, or would that include practice where you're likely to have more players on the floor at any given time?
Even though we didn't have a universal consensus around the administrative table, it would be, for taking masks off would be for active participation, period.
At a practice or at a game?
That was one place that we were pretty much consistent on. The lack of unanimity was in whether you take them off at all or not to start.
One of the things important to note too, like at the high school, we're not just using the gym. We use the cafeteria for wrestling practice. We use the all-purpose room for indoor track practice, and cheering's in there sometimes. We use the hallways when it's cold out, just to run laps in the hallways. So we're really using almost every space in that high school too.
And do you feel like in using all of that space in the high school, that other students who may be in the building after school hours would be able to get through a space of unmasked?
Yeah, because our indoor track team won't practice until 4 o'clock most days. Wrestling doesn't start until 4 o'clock every day. So by then, it's pretty clear.
Pretty quiet.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, and you could also, if there were still students in the school for other reasons, you could craft a way that they could traverse their way from the third
Well,
floor
and
to the
it's,
first floor.
it's a millisecond too, and not,
You get plenty of
odds are
stairways.
they're not
15
gonna
minutes.
stop
Yeah.
and stand there, they're gonna just walk through, and that would just be a quick, that wouldn't even be considered a close contact if there was an exposure.
Right.
I'm not in favor of having people unmasked unless they are vaccinated and participating in pool testing. That's just my opinion. I just think that the risk is too high.
And that's why I qualified my comment saying it seems to be
Yeah, no.
some, but
I
Right.
think it's just too high of a risk.
It is a really fine line because we are at a peak.
Yeah.
And
I'm
it's hard.
not certain, I'm not even certain it's a good risk to have them participating unmasked, but it's also very, very difficult to run with a mask on. It's very difficult to play basketball with a mask
And hard
on.
to
It
see.
is, yep.
So I think weighing the risk and the normalcy is
Right.
really difficult, but I just don't think it's going to be safe if somebody's not vaccinated to take their mask off. And I think all students, there's really no downside to participating in pool testing. It's not that invasive.
Well, it's
I think
not,
that
not
lowers
invasive, and one of the
the
things
risk.
that we're seeing since we've had it implemented in the schools is people who have been identified as close contacts do have that benefit of staying in school and participating in the co-extracurricular.
Yeah. Okay, but I'm gonna play devil's advocate for a minute though. Just, this is my thing as to why I was only considering the 3 and not just, you can take your mask off if you're vaccinated and pool testing, because that creates a visual cue that lets people know somewhat of your medical status. Do you see what I'm saying? Because there's no gray area there then.
I
It's
think
black or white.
Some people who are
I know.
wearing masks, some people will still be wearing masks even if they're vaccinated.
Yep.
Ivy, I wonder if, and again, there's not a statement here, but I think there should be a
Yeah.
statement, because we may have some students who are participating who are gonna choose to wear a mask, period. You include that statement in there.
This is
You know,
true.
And the other thing that I would say is, we do try, and, this conversation took place around our table the other day, I'm looking at Mrs. Clifford, she brought it up. Well, clarified it. I'm giving you credit, Mrs. Clifford.
I want credit.
You know, we do everything that we can to make sure, you look at the letters that we send out, to not provide information on who the positive person is, or even who is in quarantine. People speculate all the time and say, well, I know who it is, I know who it is. I think you're gonna have that no matter what you do. But I think if we include a line in here, because there may be some people that say, you know what? I'm really more comfortable participating and wearing a mask. So-
And I've heard from some parents who, I know their children are vaccinated because they've told me, and they said their children will be wearing masks anyway.
So I think people are gonna speculate anyway, Abby, and we deal with that, we deal with it on a regular basis in the
That-
schools.
And entering this building this evening, there's a sign on the door saying, if you're not vaccinated, wear a mask. If you are vaccinated, you don't have to wear a mask. Well, I walked in with my mask on, and I happen to be vaccinated. You can't infer by whether someone's wearing a mask or not, you can't infer that because they're wearing a mask, they're not vaccinated.
He's like, sweet.
I didn't know that.
But Abby, you make a good point, and I think, as does Paul, but I think it's incumbent on us that, encourage everybody, don't make a judgment.
Mhm.
Don't make a judgment.
How do you guys feel about the whole three option thing?
I am kind of on the fence in that, in sports in general, the amount of time that you spend within 6 feet of somebody for an extended period of time, I think it kind of is dependent on the sport, but like, I mean, wrestling matches, it's 15 minutes. If you're wrestling with someone, you're not
Six.
gonna wrestle for 15, no, that's what I'm saying. The close contact is 15 minutes. You're not gonna be in that person's space for 15 minutes.
But can I just share something? When you're
Yes.
talking your interscholastic athletics, there's another litmus test that talks about what a close contact is. That's
Okay.
physical contact. By nature of the sport of wrestling, if one of the students is a positive,
Okay.
that's a
that-
close contact. And we talked about this, and I'm looking at Josh, gonna watch a lot of videos of basketball if there's a close contact in a basketball game.
Okay, that was
Take,
gonna be my next question.
take the free throw lane when you've got a free throw going up and people boxing out.
Yeah.
So you're right about the 15 minutes and within 6
I'm
feet,
just-
but you've got a physical contact
Right.
piece too.
I'm just thinking like of the
Mhm.
the extended amount of time, like the odds of an extended amount of time happening, and I think of a sport like wrestling. If you're wearing a mask, what are the odds of that mask staying on and staying in place
I'm
through the whole
concerned
time?
Well,
about
it's,
that.
it's
not
not,
gonna
but
happen.
I think that's one of the arguments for the pool testing piece,
Right,
because
that's what I'm saying.
if you're
then-
involved in that and you're a close contact and you are asymptomatic, you can still participate.
Yeah, I'm thinking along the lines of like, I'm leaning more towards, I like the three options. I hear what Tara is saying in regards to having like a double line of defense. I hear that too. So I see either side of that, but I also, I really feel for, I feel for kids who potentially may not have as much of their own decision to be able to make that decision. My son is 12 and I let him decide if he wanted to be vaccinated or not. But that's not the case for some people and some families. You have to get vaccinated or you're not going to get vaccinated. Like some kids don't have that choice and they feel like when it's going to be a lot easier for a parent who is in this situation of very uncomfortable with vaccines to be comfortable with pool testing sooner than they would be with pool testing and a vaccine. I just feel I know, we can hear science but I feel for the families who feel very strongly about that. And then if we only offer the two option of pool testing and vaccinated or a mask, then automatically those families that feel very strongly about not getting vaccinated are going to be in the position of having to wear the mask. Whereas if you have that third layer, those families can say, okay, I'm not comfortable with the mask, but we'll opt into pool testing, or I'm not comfortable with the vaccine, but we'll opt into the pool testing, and that kind of gives some of those families who have those strong feelings a chance, And I know we have to keep everybody safe and healthy, but I also know there's more to that than just the medical health aspect of things, so.
I think physical safety has to outweigh someone's preference and opinion when it comes to vaccination, because that's making everybody else much less safe.
I'm sorry, can you speak up?
I said, I think it's too important that if somebody isn't vaccinated, it's too unsafe for everybody else, for them to go unmasked.
What about you, Paul?
So I came into this meeting tonight unsure of where I would come down on this issue. I came into this meeting sure that I wanted to find a way to provide, so we can return to winter activities, sports and theater and music, in a way that more closely resembles how it's been, pre-COVID. That we can have spectators, we can have we can have the crowd cheering and applauding and, getting to their feet when there's jumping to their feet when there's a great play just happens. I want to be able to see the theater happen with a live audience. I think we all agree that we can get to that. And I think members of the public and parents that I've heard from, that tends to be the primary thing that they're advocating for. So I think we can achieve that tonight. I was hoping that the guidance we would receive would provide, well, it does provide guidance, but I was hoping it would provide a stronger endorsement of the option to do what we're talking about tonight. It is in here, but they're not endorsing that. So they're endorsing, universal masking at all times. So if we were to go along the lines of what we're talking about we would be going against that guidance in that one respect. So I'd have to get comfortable with that. I do feel like, having a requirement for, if we're going to allow athletes and performers to be unmasked while they're actively doing their thing, we do need to require at least pool testing or a vaccination in order to do that. And yes, Dan?
I want to wait till you're done.
Okay.
I just want to offer a perspective when you're done.
Yeah. As far as requiring both pool testing and vaccination, I totally understand where Tara's coming from on that. Safety is a big concern, and we're seeing around the state and in Hancock County, we're seeing rising numbers of transmission rates. We're setting new records as far as COVID transmission, hospitalizations, ventilators, deaths. We're kind of trending in the wrong direction right now. And so if we were to take this action and allow athletes to be unmasked and performers to be unmasked, we're taking a chance. We're taking a chance that there's going to be transmission on that court or on that stage. We take chances all the time. I'm not, I acknowledge that we take a chance, we know that buses can get in an accident on the way to an event, but we're taking a chance. That's a risk that we want to, is worth taking, because we want to be able to do these things. So, yeah, school board members, we're not supposed to come into a meeting with our minds made up. And I haven't done that, and I still haven't made up my mind even now. But I do want to see, I would love to see us get to a place where we can allow students, athletes, and performers to be unmasked while they do their thing. I want to be able to feel comfortable if I was going to take that vote. So I want to hear more.
Yeah.
You
Dan?
want to go ahead?
No, go ahead.
Just offer a couple of perspectives. One is, I agree, Paul. I was hoping that the guidelines that would come down would have much more specific direction. One of the things that I do look at, however, is by encouraging and strongly recommending, which is the language, vaccinations and pool testing, it's stopping short of mandating it, but it is stating that that's being strongly encouraged. Another piece that I will put on the table, and I concur and I respect everything that Tara is saying, and don't disagree with you at all. But I look at a couple of other things. One is, even with the trending numbers that we're seeing in Hancock County and in the greater Maine area, even with the number of cases we've seen in schools, we still have not seen evidence of the community transmission within the school. And I'm not making this as a political statement, but I'm just saying, a great part of that, based on the information we've looked at, is the fact that there are mitigating practices in place, which includes masking. Now, for me, philosophically, I would have a hard time, and I really felt this way when the MPA said we're going to require vaccination for wrestlers. I understand where the sports medicine committee came. I haven't gotten myself there philosophically to say we as a group, me as a superintendent, you as a board, should mandate vaccination. As far as the pool testing, I can see that as an option. Number one, it's not invasive. There's no chemicals involved. There's a concern that if my child is participating in it, they might test positive. That's true, they may. But that's one of the things that we're trying to stay away from. But to me, that smaller risk of that is outweighed by the fact that if you're participating in it on a weekly basis, you're tracking it, you're trending it, and you're trying to prevent any potential spread. To me, that's a place where you might be able to go to get to the point where if I'm a performer in the drama production, I can take my mask off when I'm on stage. I at least have that level of proactive measure in place. Or if I'm a basketball player or a wrestler.
Kelly, can I ask Dan a couple questions?
Yeah.
What percentage of our students are participating in pool testing at the high school and at the middle school?
Last check, we were around 145 at the high school. That's out of about 500 students. And I believe 225, 230, April?
Yeah.
Out of 850? Okay. No, I believe since this conversation started, we've seen a small uptick in some people signing. We're still seeing that anyway.
Yeah.
People starting to sign up.
So at the middle school, that number you gave me was for the entire EEMS, but for
Yes.
middle school alone, which is where we're talking about co and extracurricular activities, do we know what
While
that?
you guys are talking, I can,
Right.
no, I can't. It's not broken down by grade. I don't think it is.
Because
Do you have any
One of the-
roundabout idea, Travis, as
It's
to?
around 50.
I would say we have 2 pools of middle school kids, so I think it's
Around 50
between,
out of-
40 kids.
out of
40,
like,
50.
out of around 400,
I would say you're in the 2s, aren't you?
Yeah.
230, 233.
So we're about
We
a
got
fifth.
four- We got four grade levels, 85 to 90 apiece,
85 to 90.
or 300.
So one outcome of allowing students to be unmasked while they participate is that it would could potentially drive up the number of students participating in pool testing, which is, in my opinion, a benefit to the entire school community. So that's the consideration.
And I can tell you, in RSU 25, when they passed their vote the other night, they had 85 to 90 students sign up the next day. Now granted, that was mandatory, but
And Dan, another question I have is, what do you know about what other districts have already, I know not all the districts have made decisions yet on this, but what are you seeing around in the Penobscot Valley Conference and also around the state for policies that have been adopted?
the ones that I've seen, and I've looked at, I've seen what Brewer has, I've seen what RSU 26 and Orono has, I've seen what Bucksport has, and I've seen what RSU 9 Farmington has. My understanding is Brewer, Josh, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe Brewer has a masking policy that when students are actively participating, they don't have to wear. I don't know if there's any provisions attached to it. I believe Orono is universal masking to start the year. Bucksport is universal masking to start the year. Farmington, Mount Blue is universal masking to start the year.
So you don't know of any district that's embarked on a program like the one we're considering here?
I know that Augusta School Department has mandated pool testing participation, and RSU 25 has mandated it.
Mhm.
So, Mr. Higgins, here's a question for you.
so say we went with mandated pool testing, regardless of vaccination status. So if a child, an athlete who's participating in pool testing, but is not vaccinated and is exposed from another, whether it's a student in our schools or from another school, if they're exposed in a close contact, then they will have to quarantine. But if they've been vaccinated, they will not.
No,
No.
nope.
Okay.
In fact,
Okay.
no, and this is one of the good things that came
Okay.
out from today. If you look at this
Yep.
chart on the back, and you guys all have this. The place where you would have to quarantine, where pool testing does not help you, is a community exposure. So if you go out to dinner, you test positive and you're exposed there, pool testing participation at school does nothing for you. Okay? If you are exposed within our school during the school day or a school-sponsored activity, pool testing applies. So your question specifically, Kelly, was a school-related exposure, pool testing, no masking. In that case, you could continue to attend, as long as you're not symptomatic, you could continue to attend school and other school-related activities, which would include co-curricular.
Yep.
But anything outside of that, the recommendation is that you quarantine. So you couldn't play basketball at the Y, let's say. And my understanding is that is vaccination exclusive.
Okay.
As long as you're
even if it's-
testing negative and asymptomatic.
Okay. All right,
And that's masking or not.
all right.
He said it might get longer.
And every time you get those questions, we go right back to this table.
It's
You have to,
confusing.
yeah.
Yeah, it is confusing.
It's like playing chess.
All right, so so what I was my understanding, or what I thought I understood, was that if we were doing pool testing, and the only reason you would not have to quarantine was if it was because it was a classroom exposure and everyone was mass. So, okay. All right.
This is another area where I just feel like,
It doesn't make sense,
Well,
but,
and I'd like to hear from parents on how they feel about this. What if we, would they be comfortable with this? Would they be with these parameters? I was, as I said, I feel like we are at a high point of cases. I admittedly have a very high-risk child right now that cannot get COVID. It would be, even though she's vaccinated, it could be really devastating. And she's in a few extra, co-curricular activities here. And I was 100% like, we need to mask, we need to mask. And then I get an email from a very health conservative doctor who's like, we should go with these 3 things, and they should do one thing. And I'm like, well, that's kind of funny. Like, something I would not have thought, especially from that person, they would have thought would be okay. So this is a doctor who's been very, very, as a conservative health-wise with all of this, and is saying, we should just give them a choice where if they could do this, this, or this, and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, well, that, it opens my eyes a little bit to the fact that maybe, am I thinking just along my own child's, and I'm a big component of we can't always police to the lowest common denominator. Like, it's just we're not talking about in school, we are talking about after school, and it is a choice versus mandated. Like, you have to go to school. You don't, sports are a choice. And I'm also a huge believer in, personal medical freedoms and medical privacy. Even though I talk about my family all the time, I don't expect you to do that. And I don't like people feeling like they have to share with us. But somebody else pointed out to me, well, that's my choice to share that. And it's my choice to either share that I'm vaccinated or share that my child is in pool testing, or I can just wear a mask. And that's true too. And it's hard because I feel like there's no way to not step on somebody's toes here. But what is best for our school right now? And now we don't have our first sports activity until,
You don't, but you've
But you
got
have
your
practice.
first, you've got your
but we have
first.
practices.
No, but you've got your first production in the theater.
Right,
Yeah,
right.
next week.
So that-
Theater,
that's-
I
that's-
feel like
that
they're not
pertains
as-
to this conversation,
They're not as close.
but it's the
You
same
know,
thing, but it's the same
sometimes
thing.
In this play, are they? I don't know. I thought in this play they weren't quite, but.
No, they're pretty close.
Are they?
Yeah.
I've got to say, I'm really concerned about our wrestlers because I'm sitting here, I cannot wait to take this ass off. I have an infection behind one of my ears that is probably from wearing these stupid things, and it's bad and it's not going away and it hurts. But I have to wear this anyway because my child is high risk and we're having some problems right now. But I think all the time with this going on, what's going to happen when our wrestlers are on the mats and if they're wearing a mask and somebody pulls this wrong, I think it could be
Painful.
pretty painful. I think it could be, I think you could get injured that way, you know? So do we have any wrestling parents here tonight?
They're cool.
And Abby, I think you're right.
Yeah.
I think that brings you back to the piece of, you know, if this is a direction that the board wants to go, what is a way to get there? You know, the Sports Medicine Committee is saying treat it like all other sports, and they're recommending universal masking.
Do we feel like, as a board, we have discussed our discussion portion, that if we had public comment at this point, that we would feel ready to vote after that? Or do we feel like we need more continuation of conversation here before we do that?
So we've really kind of done this backwards.
Yes.
We should have had a motion.
Right.
At first, and it should have been seconded, and then we should have had discussion.
Kelly, can
Yep.
you still do that? Because you could go right down, I'm gonna look right at the beginning of this page, which is the one we start with. Is there anyone on the board, and this isn't a vote, but who can't stand behind encouraging all students and staff participating who are eligible to get vaccinated? And anyone that.
Encouraging, I can say.
No, but I'm saying,
Mandating, no.
Go down through these pieces. There may be things that you can look at and say, we're comfortable with these. And then you could nail down the pieces, and as
Yeah.
Kelly said, you can make a motion and a second, and then you can take the
Get the
public
pieces that
comment,
work.
listen to it, and go from there. So
Yeah.
if you look at this, my sense is you would be comfortable with the statement from the school board. You recommend or encourage all students and staff participating
Yes,
who are eligible to be vaccinated.
Yes.
You would encourage people to participate in pool testing.
yes.
If I were to make a motion, or you just, in general?
But
Okay.
I suppose you could take a motion on each one of these going down through.
Nope, okay.
I guess I'm kind of looking for a consensus.
Okay.
Would there be
Yeah.
consensus on the first two items on there?
Yes.
Okay, so you've been talking about face coverings and masking. So I think the question would be, are you at a point where a motion and where you'd be comfortable making a motion in a second? Or is that something that's going to warrant more discussion before you make a motion in second and open it up for discussion?
I could make a motion at this point, if someone was ready.
Also, the way our earlier motion to move public participation till after we've discussed things, I don't know that precludes us from discussing a little bit more after the public participation.
True.
Right.
So
True.
if you're not
If we're not 100.
If you're not comfortable making a motion, having it seconded, asking for further discussion, and, because you might want to say something afterwards, I think we can still do that. I think we've,
So make a motion, get a second, and then go into discussion and allow public participation at that point?
Yeah, and then we can discuss.
I think we
more
can
if we
discuss
want
further
to.
after the public participation.
Yes.
I think that's a good idea, but just indulge me, because we might knock a number of things off this list before you do
Yep,
that.
yep.
So, face coverings, masking, you're close.
Uh-huh.
Take the second bulleted item under that, and this was something that was unanimously recommended at the administrative level.
Yes.
Is universal masking of all game and contest officials, judges, athletic trainers will be required for all indoor co and extracurricular. Is that something you can reach consensus on? Pep Band. Can you all reach consensus on the fact that we want the Pep Band to be permitted to attend home events and be seated in a separate area?
You're in the wrong. You're in the wrong.
Yeah, Mike, I can open this.
And that whatever you decide on masking would apply to them,
That would be better.
okay? I like it when this works so well. Sideline or game day cheering. I like that better, Jeff. Was that yours? Very nice. Game day cheering. Okay. Can you all reach a consensus to support permitting them to attend home events, and that the masking, whatever you determine, would apply to them.
Yes.
Locker rooms, changing rooms,
Yes.
that's easy. Okay, transportation, I'm just gonna, I like to say this, you have no choice,
Yeah.
sorry.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. I know, the Ellsworth American's gonna pick that up. Okay, spectators, can you all reach consensus that we want to have home and away spectators for games and events?
Yes.
Yes.
And mask.
I think as,
masks.
I think as
And-
long as we
and
could,
masks.
as long as we could accommodate the families and.
But don't go to the details
Okay,
yet.
I'm
but-
not going to the details.
But just
We would like to
in
have
general,
both,
because
yes.
I think
Okay.
that's one
Yes,
one
in
thing
general, yes.
that many of these folks want to hear is, are we going to be
Yes.
able to watch our kids in
Yes.
person? So, home and away. Okay.
Yes,
Yep.
And masks.
yes.
Yes.
Okay. With a capacity that still needs to be worked out.
Yep.
Right.
Okay, and a way to allocate who's able to come. And again, that's all over the board across the state. There are some places that are doing vouchers, or some places that are doing tickets. There are some places that are counting people as they come in at the door, which I know is something Josh wants to do, because he wants to be the one that says, no, you can't come in. I think he's gonna hire Mr. Bland to do that, right? No?
I think Mr. Blaine's gonna volunteer.
Game time's at 7, you'll have people at the door.
Okay, so,
At
so
7 in the morning.
that helps that. You don't really have to vote on home streaming of home events. I think that's something
No,
we'd like to do anyway.
do it.
Okay.
concession.
Concessions, okay, this is a challenging one. I guess I would say, really, the question is, do we feel that it's safe enough to offer concessions to start the school year, or would we rather put that on hold until conditions change?
I think as long as we could find a way to clean, as long as there was confidence that there would be a way to clean and someone to monitor, that would be a yes, but that would be a big if. If they can't find the people to monitor and clean that, then it would be a no-go, because you have to be able to clean that in between.
So would it potentially be a consensus of the board to offer concessions if the following
Yes.
conditions are in place?
Yes.
Yeah, and I think, and this might not be a board vote, but, how administration handles it, but concessions, there might be, what's offered at concessions may look different from what has been offered in the past. I know, like, the Down East Family Y swim team has a meet this weekend, and they're offering concessions, but no crock pots. And crock pots are a huge thing at those swim meets.
Yes.
So everything has to be prepackaged, so you're not, there's less contact with the food, there's less, I mean, people can bring their own food in, and it's like, there's still people eating in the building, right?
Well, is there consensus that people are not gonna be having food and drink in the gym or the?
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
So discretion for administrators at the level based upon factors. I know one administrator wants to make sure there's hot dogs available. I'm not gonna say who that was.
That might-
There's one of them that really wanted it.
And that might be a tough one, but yeah.
So however,
Yep.
the volleyball games, there was food in the gym. So how did that work out?
Not great.
Not great, okay,
And there really shouldn't have been,
okay.
but.
Maybe there's
All
more
right.
than one reason
So,
not to have
okay,
food
so
in the gym.
there's a consensus there. If you look at the postseason tournaments, festivals, competitions, is that something you could reach a consensus on? Now, the only question would be, in your consensus,
Yeah.
and you'd have to do this as a vote, is what you vote here going to apply for our kids no matter where they go? Or do you, when in Rome, do what the Romans do?
I think we have to follow,
I-
I would want to follow the
Yeah.
Wherever we go.
We
The
have to
guidelines of-
respect what other
When in Rome, do what the
districts.
Rome.
Yep,
Okay, so you've got a lot of consensus there, so it seems to me that the places where you're left, where you need to kind of finalize things before you can make a motion and do a second, and this is on the whole thing, then you could open it, is how you want to address the masking piece for, because it's universal for everybody, and the only thing at issue is students when they're actively participating. Okay, and how you want to accomplish that if you do. Okay. And what else is left? I think that's it.
That was it.
so the big picture after our discussion for me is, yes, we will strongly encourage vaccination. However, I now am feeling like we will require pool testing for everyone unless they want a mask. Pool testing required regardless of
think-
vaccination status.
I think that that's not a terrible idea, as someone who has a family of 5 where 3 are vaccinated and 3 of us ended up with, all 5 of us ended up with COVID regardless of vaccination status. Not saying I'm not glad I was vaccinated, because I probably would have been hospitalized if I hadn't been, but that being said, it is still possible to get COVID when you are vaccinated, and if you're being tested on a regular basis, the odds of you having it and not knowing, like my middle child did, he didn't have a single symptom, and if it hadn't been for pool testing, who knows where he might have shared it. Then I agree with you there, Kelly, I think.
I'm still not in favor of having anyone unmasked if they're not vaccinated and in pool testing.
So just to go along those 2 points to flesh it out, so Kelly, with what you said, it would be a mandatory pool. Now, would that be for everybody who participates? Because what's recommended as a guideline is students, staff, coaches, volunteers, everybody. Okay.
Unless you want to wear a mask.
Unless you wanna wear-
And you
yeah.
have that option.
Okay, yeah.
You can mask or,
Okay, so there's that piece and Tara's position with
Yeah.
regard to vaccination,
Yeah.
okay? So you may be at a point where you can make a motion and a second on this entire thing.
Yeah. And then we
Even
can
though there are
just-
differences, then if you want to take your public comment, listen to what the public says, then you can come back to your own discussion.
Okay,
Yeah, I think
let's do that.
I think that's a good
So
one.
who's gonna craft this motion? And again, knowing full well that there may be pieces of it that some of you aren't gonna vote for, and that's fine. I mean, that's,
I would make a motion that we adopt the general recommendations for winter activities as outlined on the winter athletics and co-curricular activities draft, with the exception of pool testing being mandatory if students who are in play want to be able to remove their masks.
is that this document here, Beth?
That's
Okay, the one we,
this
okay,
one.
yeah.
Yep. Yep, so it would be adopting this entire thing with the exception of students while in play could remove their masks if they are part of pool testing.
Part of pool testing and vaccinated?
Nope, it would be part of pool testing, and we would strongly recommend, if they want to remove their masks, it would be mandatory for them to be part of pool testing, and we would strongly recommend that they also be vaccinated.
Does anybody want to second that motion?
Let's make
Just
sure,
make sure
make sure that
Dan
we've got it
has
right.
it.
Make sure Dan's got it, 'cause it was a long one.
So Beth, what I'm hearing is to adopt the guidelines as presented and amended, because we made a couple of amendments, like concessions will duplicate.
Yep.
With one of the specific amendments being that student participants must be masked unless they participate in pooled testing.
Yes. So students who wish to remove their masks would have to.
But only during
Right, but
competition
only
and
during
play.
competition or play,
So in essence, the exception to mandatory pool testing would be,
to wear a mask.
yeah, I got it, I got it.
And this is only during play, this isn't sitting on the sidelines.
Active participation.
Yes, thank you.
And everyone else would, coaches,
Yes.
referees,
Yes.
Everybody.
everybody else
Yes.
would have to wear masks.
That's on
Yeah.
that portion of it, yep. Whew.
So the motion is to adopt the guidelines as amended, and a specific amendment is masks are required for everybody, with the exception of students who are actually participating if they are enrolled in pool testing.
Yes.
yes.
So Beth made that as a motion.
Do you have a second?
Does anybody want to second this motion as is?
I'll second it. Okay,
Okay.
discussion?
All right, let's,
So I think the question you want to ask, so there's a motion and a second that you can vote on. So the question is, do you want to take your public comment now?
Yes.
Hear what the members of the public would like to say? And then when they're done, public comment's done, you come back and you discuss?
Yes.
Okay,
All right, we are back to public participation.
Hello, Joel Horn. I just would really appreciate it if you do give the kids a chance to play maskless. Certainly, jumping in and doing the pool testing, excuse me, I don't think it's too much to ask, so. But we really appreciate it. Thank you.
Can I
Joe,
just,
can I ask clarification so I get your comment right? Did you say you do think it's too much to ask or not?
No, I don't. You know, if
I
you want to
shouldn't hear you
participate,
properly.
yeah, I'm sorry, my voice is scratchy today. But, you know, if you participate in pool testing or the vaccine, I think the kids should be able to compete maskless.
can I ask real quickly too, when does wrestling start?
Monday.
Okay, so it's right here.
Yeah,
Okay.
and we actually have a meet on the 4th at Bucksport.
Wait, does that mean you're coaching again?
No, well, my son wrestles, so.
I thought that was an offer.
Right, I heard a week.
Yeah, well, I mean, every sport, you know, they're tight in their communities and whatnot, but like, wrestling is kind of special. It's one-on-one. It's, you know, you compete against the other kid, and there's nobody else to blame anything on for your performance. And wearing a mask while you're trying to do that would greatly hinder it, even though it's only 6 minutes. From the minute you step inside that circle, you have to be giving 100%, and it makes it harder to do significantly wearing a mask. So I would certainly be for my son doing the pool testing to be able to wrestle mask-free.
Thank you, Mr. Horn.
Thank you.
Anybody else like to speak? About,
Is that it?
Are you gonna-
Okay.
Are you about to vote?
We'll discuss and then we'll vote after, so if
Right,
if
this
there's
is-
any.
Can I say one thing?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think you're on the right track. I just want to make sure because we have, members in our play that have been working hard for 2 months and some are, and I don't know this, but I'm just guessing like every sports team, some are vaccinated, some are not vaccinated, some are in pool testing. And so I would just keep that in mind because they start a week from tomorrow.
Yes,
And
they
to
would have-
replace somebody would be impossible.
No, they'd still be able to, the mandatory would be if they want to remove their masks. So
No,
they could
correct,
still
correct.
participate.
Yeah, and that's why I said you're on the right track. I'm just making sure.
Have they been
That's all.
practicing in masks?
Mhm.
So this would be like a.
This
Yeah.
is,
Can you clarify what you're making sure of, just like?
I'm just making sure there are those three different scenarios, rather than saying you definitely have to be, definitely have to pool test or be vaccinated to participate.
No.
no,
That's-
no,
okay.
no, no, no.
Okay, no, I know, but I'm just saying,
Yep.
I just want to be clear that
But please
that's,
don't do
Right.
that.
okay.
So, Mr. Clifford, that does bring something up, though. So they start a week from today?
tomorrow.
From tomorrow? So pool testing, they would have to be enrolled in pool testing
To take off their mask.
to take off their masks. So that doesn't leave them a whole lot of time because pool testing is on Tuesdays, correct?
And it's
here-
not next week, though.
Oh, okay.
So
So they would-
what
yeah,
you'd be talking
that's
about
right.
there is, now, they can enroll, but they won't have their first pool test until the week after.
We come back.
How many-
Thanksgiving.
Right.
How many weeks do they perform? Just that 1 week?
2 weekends in a row.
2 weekends, so they would have 1 weekend with the masks and then potentially, if they opted into the.
They could sign up immediately, and the next
Yeah.
time pool testing is done,
Yeah.
Tuesday after we come back, they'd be in.
Yep.
Yeah, and then they would be able to possibly their
Yep.
second performance
Mhm.
if they're in pool testing taken. So.
I just want to make sure we're staying with those three scenarios,
Yeah.
that, just to keep in mind that, another decision would rule out those kids, that's all.
So what you're advocating is including vaccination as an option to take the masks off?
Yeah.
Because that's not what the motion says, okay?
Yeah.
I just
Yeah.
want to make sure before we vote, like, if this is your time to say, if you're uncomfortable with this, like, this is it, guys.
Hello, I'm Amy Atherton. I have 3 kids in the school. I think everybody knows I'm a huge proponent of masking all the time, 100%. But I really like the option of being, if everyone is required to pooled test, I'm comfortable with taking masks off during competition. So I can give a little. So I just wanted to put that out there, that I love the idea, but I think everybody should be required to be in the pool testing in order to play, vaccinated, not in order to play, but in order to take the mask off to play. So vaccinated, non-vaccinated, if you want to take your mask off, you're in pool testing. You sign up for pool testing. But if you don't, then you wear your mask. That's,
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, I do want to treat this with love because.
Your name?
Could
I
you
can
state
be-
your name, please?
Oh, yeah, my name's Tim Bland. My daughter is a cheerleader at Ellsworth High School. It's her senior year. And I get very passionate about things, so I have to reel myself in a lot. So I don't want to be abrasive. I don't want to be a jerk. I respect all you guys so much. I think you're doing a great job. And in fact, I'm really encouraged by the conversation that's happened here tonight. I thought it was going to be more along the lines of whether we're going to even have a winter sports season or any kind of drama or any of that. So I'm really encouraged. Along the masks thing, I think it's very, I think the science on the mask is interesting at best. I think that whether you put a piece of paper over your mouth or a piece of cloth, this is an aerosol virus, and if you wear it K95, it's going to be completely different. So, and that's everybody's choice. I'm fully in favor of family choice. That's what I want. We are never going to get to zero COVID. We're going to be battling this for a long time. The cohort that we should be worrying about is our kiddos, and this doesn't affect kiddos the same way as it affects elderly people and people with underlying diseases. So it's according to the CDC. I'm going by the CDC's numbers. So I know you guys probably know this already. This is very emotional, but I wanted to put that out there. I think we're lucky enough that we're almost 2 years into this whole thing, and a lot of other communities have figured this out already. There's been sporting events all over this country where people are not masking, where people are celebrating and cheering, and there have not been massive outbreaks, according to, that are getting everybody sick. So, and other than that, I think I'm all set. Unless you guys have any questions, kickoff is in about 3 minutes. So.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I know my phone goes.
Everyone's on to rushing it out of here.
I'm Shannon Curtis. I just have a question. So I have been texting my kids because just to keep them updated of where this meeting is going. And I also allow my kids to make choices. And should they opt out of pool testing, they're well aware that they would have to wear their mask to participate. Can they change their mind in January?
Oh, of course.
Okay, so if they start pool testing in January and things are good, then they can take their masks off?
Yep.
Okay, so it's not we have to decide now,
Right.
it's a moving target?
And
Right.
Pool testing, since it started, Shannon, people can
It's
sign up
fluid.
at any point. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, just had a question.
I just want to clarify, if we have an opposing school come to us, we are going to follow the more strict schools policy. So if MDI comes who's requiring full masking, will full mask?
I believe that we have to, correct, Mr. Higgins?
Well,
Play against
that's,
We don't have to, but.
Still,
that's a piece, and that's going to play out because, Abby brought this up before. Does the Penobscot Valley Conference vote as a league supersede what you decide as a school board? I don't think it does, but that would not preclude another school from saying,
We don't want to play.
if they're not wearing masks, we don't have to come. So then we would make a decision.
Yeah.
Do we put our masks on or not?
I think the
just
easiest
think-
thing to do would just be to follow the conference guidelines, whether we think we have to or not. Just one, for good sportsmanship,
Yeah.
and two, to keep things as normal as possible, because we don't want people canceling games. We don't want kids getting ready
Mhm.
to have a game, and then at the last minute, school's like, oh, well, we're not coming because of your standards.
And I think, Tara, that is something that, through your conversation, you folks can amend that motion that's on the table to include that.
I think the kids will need to, in some respect, get used to wearing a mask on some level.
Yep.
If they go to the cross center right now, there's masks required at the cross center for indoor activities. So on some level, they don't want to not be used to wearing them, so
Yeah.
it.
Right, and that's
That's
another
right.
thing,
That's
if we make it to
coach's
the
decision.
tournament season and we haven't been wearing masks all
Right.
year and everyone else has, then.
And if you saw the article in the American this week, Larry Deans, who coaches over at Bucksport, actually had that conversation with his kids. If we get to where we want to go, you're probably going to have to wear them anyway, so.
Yeah.
Anyways.
Well, and of course, at the end of the day, you can make that decision. If you, as a family, or you as an athlete want to practice at that level, or you as a family want to have masking regardless of if you're in pool testing or vaccinated, that is obviously always a choice.
And I think the coaches should still have the choice as well. If they think that that's what's best for their team in their situation, then coaches should still have the option of requiring a mask for practice and games.
Well, but that's kind of the job of the board, though. That would supersede and just a level of,
They-
yeah.
If they think that that's what's best for, if they're gonna have to play, 4 out of 5 teams that are going to be masked, and they're gonna be masked in
Oh,
4
okay.
out of 5 games, the coach should say, we're practicing in mask, and we're gonna.
So
Get
if
used
I'm
to
a,
it.
if I'm a coach and I know
Yeah.
my next 3 opponents are all wearing masks, I, as a coach, could say, let's get prepared.
I would think so. I think
Okay,
that should
well,
be
no,
a
I
coaching
understand what you're
decision. I wouldn't think we tell the coaches, you're not allowed to make kids wear a mask, when we tell teachers that they can, that they have to. That doesn't make sense to me. And if that's what they think they need to do to win, I don't want to take that away from them. I'm pretty competitive. If somebody told me I couldn't teach my kids how to do a 2-move checkmate, I wouldn't be happy about that. Like, no.
So,
Hi.
I'm Charlotte Jordan, and again, I think one of the things that a lot of the students mentioned last week was the desire to play without masks. They actually commented on the struggle of wearing a mask and trying to play a sport. It's one of the reasons that wrestling was canceled last year, was because the MPA decided that it was not safe for wrestlers to wear a mask, knowing the level of exertion that those kids put into that sport. Another thing that you need to realize is that a lot of the people that were listening to the comments that were being made via live stream could not hear any of the comments that were made because the people speaking were masked. So when you talk about drama, music, and whatnot, those kids truly, if they want to be heard, whether it's a small part or a big part, need to have that opportunity to remove their masks. So one thing I would suggest that you keep in mind is that if you're going to allow participants in drama, music, whatever, to unmask, that you consider allowing the school nurse to Binax test the 13 kids that are doing this play next weekend, so that they can perform to their truest potential.
That's a fantastic idea.
The other thing I want you to think about long-term, big picture, I work in healthcare. I've seen us go through, we don't have enough masks. And my concern is that if you require everyone to be pool tested, you're running the risk of taking those tests from people who truly need them. So think about that before you say you have to pool test regardless of whether or not you're vaccinated. That's it.
Thank you. Any other comments? Okay, I'm going to close public participation. Any other discussion among the board?
Are we
Um,
well stocked?
I have a question. So next week, because the students will only be there on Monday and Tuesday, no, they're only there on Monday and Tuesday, right?
Correct.
So we're not doing pool testing next week because we can't do the follow-up rapid
Well,
test.
We couldn't do the follow-up, but the company is not doing it next week.
Okay, so we don't have a choice.
We don't have an option.
All right. If we were to adopt this motion as amended, it puts the high school musical performance, makes it a little bit difficult for them because any students who are not enrolled in pool testing will not have an opportunity to do so before the first weekend performances. So, and Charlotte Jordan just raised this same question, which I was had planned to raise myself. Is there a way that we can do what she just suggested and have the Binax Now test administered to?
I'm looking right now.
Okay.
See if it is a permissible use.
Yep. And then another question along these same lines, suppose that, so typically the pool tests happen on a Tuesday, right? What if a student is absent, is enrolled in the program, has been doing it every week, but then one Tuesday they're not in school, so they don't get a chance to participate in the pool? How does that affect their eligibility to participate?
They'd have to
That,
wear a
that
mask.
question came up for next week when we don't have the ability to do pool testing. So students who are still actively enrolled in it who cannot be tested, that status carries on to the next week.
Okay.
And if they happen to have an exposure, they would have to be tested, the follow-up test, the next week.
Mhm.
But they would still maintain the status that they have right now.
So being enrolled will give them that status, and if they miss a week, they still are, they still are enrolled and still
But
have.
in order to be part of the benefit of pool testing, you
Right.
have to have been tested once.
Okay, so,
Mrs. Clifford may have
And
some
students who
information.
are absent, our nurse makes contact with them and asks them to do a drive-by. So if they're home sick or doing that, I know that we did several on Tuesday of this week. They make contact to see if they can come in for pool testing. And then Nurse Merrill will go out, swab, then bring them in and let them know the results. So
Okay.
that's something that we do. We encourage to keep all of our pools together and
Yep.
testing. So I just wanted to share that.
Thank you.
That isn't above and
That is
beyond,
very
nothing
helpful.
is. Wow.
Yep. Any more discussion?
I think
Mr.
Dan is
Higgins
looking into.
still looking.
I do think that we do need to have a further conversation about what Tara had mentioned in regards to coaches being able to make that decision. And my big concern would be, not that I think that any of our coaches would do this, but I would hate to see a coach be potentially accused of doing something for a political reason if they said, nope, we're all gonna mask because everyone, I think that it would have to be that they either followed what the board has decided or it's a consensus of the coach and the team. So like if the coach says, hey, our next 4 games, we're gonna be playing against people who require masks, do we wanna practice in masks to get ready? And the consensus of the team is, yeah, let's do that so we can be prepared, then they would be able to do that. But I do think you're in a muddy situation if you give the option for the coach to just say, hey, our next few games, we're gonna have to be masked, so we're just gonna practice in masks, guys, because that's mostly what we're gonna be doing. Like, I don't wanna put any of our coaches in that position, and I don't wanna put, I think that could be a really uncomfortable place
I think it could.
for that to be, for the coaches to be.
I think that could be uncomfortable for the kids too, though.
Yeah.
To put them in the position of making an adult decision.
yeah, I think we leave it to the coach, and Josh can back them up or give them guidance as well, but I think we trust our coaching staff and our athletic director to
But if
to
we're
make those
gonna
determinations.
let the coach make the determination, then why would we even need to make a determination this evening if we're gonna say, we're gonna recommend this, but if the coach says you have to wear masks to be
That-
prepared, then you have to wear masks.
That's a coach making a decision on how to help better prepare the team for the competition, right? So it's not superseding or overruling our decision.
I want to add something on that, but as far as what was recommended to help with the performance next week, one of the uses that we're going to be asking you to approve is, the example we gave for the University of Maine. Okay, so under the University of Maine example, as long as we're not taking up supplies that are there for pool testing or testing of symptomatic people under certain circumstances, we could do it on a one-time basis. And right now, the supplies are there. I mean, Charlotte makes a very good point, but right now, we had this conversation with the nurses the other day and talking with them. If we get to a point where supplies and the supply chain slows down, we're gonna have to say, sorry, University of Maine option is out. But right now, we could make that happen on a one-time piece, 72 hours before next Thursday's performance. So that could be done on Monday or Tuesday. So that would still allow you to do the masking, pool testing piece you're talking about in your motion and not put your performance next week in jeopardy, unless, of course, somebody tests positive. I mean, that's the only other side of it. But yes, you can do that. And as far as the piece of giving coaches a latitude, as a former coach, I would appreciate the opportunity because you always want to be able to put your team in a position where they can be successful. But as divisive as the mask issue has been, I have a hard time putting any of our coaches in a position where we're going to say, okay, we're playing Bucksport and MDI next week. They both mask. Let's wear masks. If you have a parent or a family who is vehemently opposed to it, I really would not want to put our coaches or athletic administrators in that position. I also want to clarify, what you're approving tonight is not just for the high school level, it's for our middle school athletes too. That's my only concern on, Tara, I like what you're saying,
Yeah.
particularly from the coaching piece, but that's something that scares me. And we've seen the hate, venom, and vitriol that has been out there around some of these issues. I don't want to see any of our kids and coaches put in that position.
That was exactly my thought process without using those exact.
Can we just write it in to say that if the decision is made because they're playing masked teams, that it may be necessary for coaches to, let's just write that in there. It may be necessary for coaches to write in to.
You can make a motion to amend.
And that's something you as a board can do, yeah.
Mr. Higgins, can you read the motion again if you have it
I
written
do.
out there?
Motion was made by Mrs. Altieri to adopt the guidelines as amended, with the specific amendment that masks required for active participation unless the students are enrolled in pool testing. And the only time they can take the masks off is during active participation, and that's students only.
All right, so we have a first and a second.
I think Tara's preparing.
So, and through your discussion, I think there've been a couple of things. One is, Tara's doing, was there another piece that somebody was looking at as a potential amendment? Or was that the only one?
I think that was the only one.
And maybe the one amendment, well,
Do we have to vote on
No, you would.
the Penobscot Valley?
Oh, yeah.
I don't think we're voting on that right at the moment.
well, I think
Whether
that's one of the amendments that you talked about back through this piece was going with the higher restriction. So if you approve the masks off with pool testing piece while you're in active participation, and MDI comes here and they are wearing masks, we wear masks.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So that's one of the amendments that I'm talking about.
Okay.
So, Tara, are you going to make an
Yes,
amendment?
I just finished
Okay.
writing
Yeah,
it.
just, I'm giving you time.
Sure. I'd like to make a motion to add in language that says it may be necessary for coaches to make a decision to wear masks in practice, to prepare to play teams, to prepare team members to play games against opponents when masking will be required. I'm sorry. Can't read my handwriting.
How about
I think I got it, Tara.
I can.
Did you get that, Dan?
The motion is essence, adding an amendment to what's already here that would make a statement, it may be necessary for coaches, advisors to have team members wear masks in practice to prepare teams to participate against teams who are wearing masks. That's the general essence of what you're asking.
Yeah.
So if Tara's asking that, so the question would be, she's making that as an amendment to the motion, So let's get a second on that and a vote, and then we'll determine how to work that back into the original one.
Okay, do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Who was that? Was that Beth or Abby? I couldn't tell.
That was Abby.
Is that you, Abby? Okay.
All those in favor for the amendment?
Okay, so that's 5-0 on the
No,
amendment?
it's 4-0.
Oh, 4-0?
I did not.
Are you abstaining? Oh.
Any opposed?
Okay. Okay. So you've got an amendment that has been approved by 4-1. So to make it part of the original motion, a couple of ways you can do this. Kelly, you did the second on the original motion.
Yep.
So you could
Would
withdraw
you
your second.
withdraw your second, and then Beth could withdraw her motion to allow this to be included with the original motion?
Okay. So, Kelly, are you willing to withdraw your second? And if you don't, if she does not withdraw her second, would we have to vote on the motion that exists?
Yes.
And then if it was denied, then we would make a new motion, correct?
Yeah.
I am not willing to withdraw my second.
Okay. So we have to vote on the original without the amendment.
So you can vote on the original without the amendment, but you still could have an additional vote made to include an additional clause.
Okay. So, which comes first?
The chicken or the egg?
Well, right now, you voted to approve the amendment, but it is not included in the original motion.
Okay.
So we're in a weird place. I see why Kelly would not agree with that. And it's the same reason that I had mentioned and that Dan had mentioned, and that I just have concern for our coaches if they were to make that decision, because we have, most of us sitting up here have been on the other side of that very avid
Right.
disagreement with masking. So I do see that as a very uncomfortable place for our coaches to be.
I do feel like it's an uncomfortable place. I feel like the board makes the rules and, and we make the policy, and
Right.
that is what has to be followed. It can't be left up to discretion, because that becomes a sticky place for people.
Is this
I
true?
feel like it needs to be black and white.
I feel like we're saying they may take their masks off for active play, but not that they must. And I think if I was a coach, I would want to retain that, and I am a coach. Obviously, I don't think kids need to be unmasked for chess, it's just not very exerting, but.
People can't hear you.
Oh, sorry. I just think coaches need to have that discretion over their team, because if I was a basketball coach, I would want my kids to be able to win. If they're going to play somebody who is wearing a mask.
But Kelly does have a point, though. It starts to take away the necessity of the board entirely, and it does then put something on our staff that that I do kind of feel like they've made it pretty clear in some ways that they don't want that to be put on them too. It's just
It may be a moot point, because there may not be a coach that's going to say, yes, I'm going to have my kids practice with a mask. But I still think that they should have the discretion. I think we're saying that young people who are playing a sport that requires exertion or in a play may do their thing without a mask, but not that that the coach must allow them to.
Let me offer this. I can tell you that I know one school in Hancock County that's on our basketball schedule has a mandatory masking policy. So when we compete against that team in Ellsworth or in Bucksport, based upon what's in this plan, our kids will have to wear masks in the game.
But
Period.
I would also argue in regards to, I know that, we're saying that the coach would have the overall ability to say that if we adopt this, but I think that we're underestimating our students in that if the
Right.
coach is saying, as their coach, as someone that they respect, hey, guys, I think we should talk about masking up for our practices regardless of pool testing status, so that we have an ability to practice at that level. I think we're underestimating whether or not students who are really passionate about the game that they're playing are gonna say, awesome, coach, I'm gonna do that.
I think that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, but what I think what I'm getting at is that it would be more of like it would be more of a team decision, like that, like, what I'm saying is, in this original motion, we're not saying that people can't wear masks if they want to. We're saying that
Right.
if they really want to take them off, that they could.
May I ask a question?
Yes.
And again, many of us have coached, many of us have played as athletes. And coaches make those decisions all the time. Is it necessary to have that amendment? We may have coaches that will have that conversation with their kids and say, look, like I used the example before, our next 3 games, we're gonna be required to wear masks, or we're getting prepared to play in the tournament next week. We should be wearing masks because we have to wear it at the tournament venue.
Right.
To me, set aside the political thing for a second. It always used to be when we were gonna go to the old Bangor Auditorium to play, schools would always find a way to rent the gym for an hour or half an hour to go up and at least get on the floor. To me, this is no different. That may happen out of natural volition. And I'm gonna gather, I can't speak for any of the parents that are here, but I'm gonna gather, we have parents here who have kids who play. If that's a decision that's going to be made so that they can be better prepared to participate in and win in a game, I would hope that parents would say, so be it.
I would too. And I think the reason we started talking about this amendment in the first place was because we were worried that coaches were going to get a lot of pushback if they asked the kids to wear masks to get prepared for a game where they were going to be masked.
I think that they potentially could either way, with the amendment or without it.
I couldn't imagine. So just knowing our athletic department here and the kids that play, I can't imagine a coach saying, hey, we've got this going on. Those kids are going to be like, yeah, we're going to do everything we possibly
Yeah.
can to be prepared for these
That would be the
competitions.
situation too.
Yeah.
And I'm totally,
So I think what Tara's hoping to do is hoping to protect the coach in that
Yeah.
situation.
Oh,
Yeah.
yes,
So-
of
Yeah.
course.
Right.
that was my only concern with that.
Yeah.
I get both sides of that.
Yep.
So
So
we're
where to
still-
go?
But I'm not
from
trying to
this?
be obstructionist if it's a
No,
non-issue.
absolutely not.
And it might be a non-issue.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd be comfortable leaving this out of the motion. I don't think it's going to be a big issue, and I think it's I think the motion is cleaner if we just take out this direction for the coaches and let them deal with it as they see fit. And I think we can trust our student population, our student athletes and their families to go along with the coach's judgment. We have a really good climate and culture here in our school around athletics, and I think it's going to work out.
And I think, let's be frank, let's just say, and I don't think we would, let's just say we had the situation where a coach says, look, we've got this next 3 games coming up, I need you to wear masks in practice. If a student doesn't want to because they don't have to and they're in pool testing, so be it. I would say don't make an issue out of it, but when you step on the court for the game, you're gonna be wearing it.
Right,
I mean,
or you're not going to be
I think we
stepping on
need
the
to,
floor
I think we need
because
to
you're gonna
avoid
be
making
doing
masking a political issue.
Yeah.
But I think that example that I'm giving is probably the rare exception rather than the rule. Most of our kids are gonna say, yeah,
Yeah.
we've got MDI coming
Yeah.
up, let's do it.
Absolutely.
So do we need to make a motion to get rid of the amendment?
Nope.
Or we just?
We haven't voted on it.
Vote on the,
Cool.
yep.
Awesome.
So we go back to the original motion.
Just to adopt the guidelines as amended, and this, one of the specific amendments is, pool testing is required for students, participants to take masks off while actively involved, actively participating.
Okay, so we've got a first, second discussion. All those in favor? Opposed?
One.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you.
Outstanding.
All right. the next item we have is to authorize the expanded use of Binax COVID tests.
I think I gave an explanation of this a bit earlier, but you've got a memo that outlines it. And just to clarify, we're looking at expanding it to allow our nurses to use the Binax tests, if the supplies are available, to test symptomatic staff and students, not asymptomatic, but symptomatic, and to support the venue piece, University of Maine and so forth, which would include the one example for drama next week.
Oh my gosh, and if we could make that happen.
And this-
I bet those dramas.
And
those dramas
this is
would
something
be
that our
so
school nurses all endorse, by the way,
Awesome.
all three of them, Jackie, Joe, and Michelle.
Great.
All right.
Do we have a motion?
I recommend a motion to authorize the expanded use of the Binax COVID test as recommended.
I will second that.
Abby, Kelly,
Discussion?
I think that's a great idea.
Mr. Frost, did you have your,
I
okay, all right, I thought you
Come back to
wanted
me.
to speak, okay.
He's like,
All
talk to me
right.
later.
All those in favor?
Thank
Thank you
you.
very much. All right, that brings us to item F, calendar and announcements. We have a special school board meeting Tuesday, November 23rd, here in council chambers at 6 o'clock. We have a school board meeting Tuesday, December 14th, 6 o'clock, here in council chambers.
I'm also
And-
going to add something.
Oh, sure.
Because city council and school board has been invited to participate in the annual Christmas tree lighting right in front of City Hall here, that, if you saw that big 25-foot Christmas tree. And a bunch of us will be dressed in Victorian theme, but it creates a situation where there might be more of us than not creating a quorum. So if anybody would like to come,
Yes, that's a good.
you're not only invited, you're encouraged. Please, come downtown to the tree lighting. It's Small Business Saturday, too. We would love for you. There'll be free hot chocolate,
What time is that?
5 p.m.
Thank you.
and that's the 27th, Abby?
Yep, the Saturday after Thanksgiving, 5 p.m. right here in front of City Hall. It's going to be quite lovely.
That was, I'm glad you mentioned
And
that.
it's gonna be
since there were
fun.
several of us.
Thank
And-
you.
And also, I do want to really quickly just note, mostly for Mr. Clifford, that if any of those students who are participating in drama want to be able to remove their masks, that they'll want to make sure that they get opted into the pool testing so that they can do those Binax tests next week to be able to potentially use those Binax tests next week to take off their masks for the performance.
Thank you. All right, item G, adjournment. Do we have a motion?
Can I ask a clarifying question?
Sure.
Did we do anything with capacity?
We did.
Not yet.
Not yet.
No,
Okay.
capacity,
The-
we're gonna let you guys kind of play with that a little bit.
The vote was to permit home and away fans, with the understanding that it needs to be a capacity determined and a process by which that capacity is allowing people in.
Yes,
And as you know, over the past few days, you guys have looked at a lot of different models.
Yes.
yes.
Okay. And the board is given discretion for you guys to put that in place and manage it.
You're welcome.
Can I, can I ask one
I
other
think
follow-up
when you look
question?
at the guidelines, Josh, the pieces that are there are spacing to the extent possible. You're talking, as you and I talked earlier today, 3 feet to the extent possible.
Yeah. I'm fine with that, but just from someone that has to administer, obviously, a lot of students starting on Monday with the pool testing and not having it on Tuesday. So students that have not participated in pool testing up to this point need to be masked
Yes,
until the next opportunity, which would be the
Next Monday.
right.
following
Following
Tuesday.
Tuesday.
And the students in the play can do the Binax Now test, but not athletes.
Because it's a performance.
Hopefully.
Right. It would be like if they had a game. If the, if
But
the
it might-
players had a game,
I'm just going back to masking, but masks don't have to be worn in practice if they're doing pool testing.
right.
Right, but in this case, what they voted to do was authorize because the performance is coming.
Okay,
And middle school kids have worn masks in practice for a
Correct.
couple of weeks.
okay. It's just from an
But
administrative.
I would encourage those students who want to take their masks off when they're participating, sign up.
I had 5 or 6 show up today and
I
asked
bet you have
to,
more tomorrow.
yeah.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you for
Thank you.
clarifying. Do it.
Did I have a motion?
Having no further business, I move that we adjourn the meeting.
I second that.
Abby?
Discussion? All those in favor?
5-0, and it is 9:04.